What was that conversation like? Because there's never been any doubt that Drew's parents were in favor of the death penalty here. I mean, that had to be an interesting conversation.
The Shadeen and Walker family are genuinely good people. They have suffered an unimaginable loss, and in the wake of that have acted with grace. And our office has really grown close to that family over the last 2 decades. And we want to continue to stand by them as much as we possibly can in the months and years to come. We hold them in the highest regard and sincerely wish them the greatest measure of peace possible. In terms of what they are going to say in reaction to this, I'm going to leave that to them out of respect for their privacy and their ability to speak their truth. But we're thankful to have the close relationship that we have with them.
What does this mean? I shouldn't say mean. What is life going to be like for Alfonso Rodriguez?
Well, I'll leave that to others to speculate.
I'm talking about a day. I mean, he's still going to remain in federal prison. He's still going to remain, I mean, what does this mean for him as he lives out the rest of his life in custody?
Well, here's what I will say. Thanks to the successful and effective advocacy of the original trial team, including former United States Attorney Drew Wrigley, as a result of the effective efforts of our appellate attorneys and support staff over the years, Rodriguez will remain a convicted murderer, and he will, with the utmost certainty, draw his last breath in federal prison. Beyond that, I don't think much about him.
Okay. And I think that's going to be on people's minds because, like for me who, when it comes to the death penalty, I would have slept just fine. For me, it isn't as much of a moral issue as much as what it is to some degree a mechanical issue, because all of these years later, we're still having a debate about whether or not to put Alfonso Rodriguez to death. And did he deserve that? I have no problem with that, Mac, none whatsoever. My whole point is you've got the appeals process, you've got the appeals process, you've got the appeals process, and maximum security federal prison isn't exactly a Taj Mahal. I mean, and so, the cost to the federal government, I mean, do you have any idea what it cost for all these appeals?
The 93 of us that have the pleasure of serving as United States attorneys, we don't get to talk about policy. And when it comes to the costs of appeal, I guess the first thing to indicate is that it wasn't the government appealing this. It was.
But it was the government defending it as well. I mean, really, the attorney, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I doubt that Alfonso Rodriguez had the wherewithal to pay for the appeal process. I mean, was the federal government paying for the attorneys in the appeal?
Capital defendants have access to exceptional defense counsel.
Right, so it's costing money federally both ways.
And the decision to appeal obviously was up to Mr. Rodriguez. What I will say is that within the Office of United States Attorney, taxpayers get an incredible value with the attorneys that are there. Of course, we're going to defend the case throughout the appellate process. That's our jobs. When it comes to experts, yeah, absolutely. I mean, that can get expensive, but putting a price on justice is a very difficult thing to do.
I know that part of what happened here was a conversation about a medical examiner in the appeal process, and I'll speak to Drew about this in a little bit as well. But there was questions about the credibility of an individual medical examiner when it came to all of this, and that was one of the things cited when the death penalty was overturned on appeal. And so I wonder if at times people understand that process that went from the convicted with death penalty to being appealed to life in prison. And so I'm not sure, U.S. Attorney Schneider, that people understand what steps got us to here. And so if you could, I think, reflect upon that.
Yeah, it is a convoluted process. I think that you could start way back in 2004 to go through that process, Joel, but I think what really sent this case in a different direction was the decision by Judge Erickson in late summer, early fall of 2021. Certainly that put this on a path that was not originally anticipated. That's a decision that, Joel, as officers of the court, we understand the judge has the right to make, but we also have the right to disagree with that. And as recently as last week, we were prepared to go forward with a second penalty phase trial in spite of that opinion. Obviously, the Attorney General's directive has changed that entirely.
Okay. This is going to be a really easy question. For some, they're going to say, what an absolute ridiculous question. But for others, they might not understand this. But does this ever get reversed in the sense of the next Attorney General comes back and says, listen, we want you to go forth and go after and appeal this decision again. We want the death penalty here. Could that ever happen again?
It could not in this case. No.
So it's done.
It's that decision is done.
As far as whatever happens in the courts, it's done. In terms of trying to overthrow the conviction, is that done?
This is not something that could be overturned by another administration. It is done, Joel.
Okay. Did the current administration give you reasons as to why they wanted this done, put to bed?
I was very straightforwardly directed last Friday in a concise letter from the Attorney General to withdraw the notice. And so with regard to the rationale in this particular case, or more broadly, that's not something I can speak to.
Okay. I guess without any question I can ask you about the Shadeen family needs to be asked to the Shadeen family.
I think that's only fair.
Yeah, I get that, and I understand that. But it's interesting to me, and where this has been your community for a long time. North Dakota has been your home for forever. I mean, this case hasn't gone away. It's still here with all these appeals, the media still has to cover it because it's still making news. I'm not, it'll still get talked about by people in my generation, your generation. I'm just wondering if now that we're done through the legal process, if this doesn't put some of that to rest. And I'm curious what your thoughts are on that.
Well, I hope we never forget about Linda Walker, Alan Shadeen, and that wonderful family. I hope we never forget about Drew Shadeen's memory. Obviously, my thoughts are with the family, Joel. This is not in any way, shape, or form about me, but Drew and I attended the University of North Dakota at the same time. We had friends in common, and I will never forget her, and I know there's tens of thousands of people in this region that care deeply about her family and that will not forget her memory.
And the reason I ask that more than anything is because of the viciousness of the crime, the man that committed it, how, to me, he'll always be this individual that everyone, as evil as it was, everyone can use as an example of why law enforcement needs certain tools to be able to do their job. And, of course, you are law enforcement. And I think that's a point that needed to be made.
Yeah, he was a brutal murderer, and there were many failures along the way that led to this tragic case. I know it's small solace for many out there that he's going to spend the rest of his life in a federal prison, but that's the fact.
Okay. Is there anything else you'd like to add?
Just to the extent possible that this wonderful community can be there for the Shadeen and Walker family at this difficult time. They're wonderful people who we hold in with the utmost respect.